to address the occasion.
Honorable Sri Nara Chandrababu Naidu Garu, the Honorable Chief Minister of State of Andhra Pradesh, Honorable Sri Justice Dheeraj Singh Thakur, the Chief Justice of the Andhra Pradesh High Court, and all the Honorable Judges of the Andhra High Court present here. Sri Amalpati Srinivasan Garu, the Learned Advocate General for State of Andhra Pradesh, the Learned Additional Solicitor General for Union of India, Shri K. Chidambaram, the President of the Andhra Pradesh High Court Bar Association, all the other office bearers of the association, the senior government officials, the collector, the SP, the learned district judge of the district, and all the members from the district judiciary, the senior advocates, members of the bar, and friends. It's a matter of great pleasure for me to be here to speak with you on the successful journey of the Indian Constitution for last 75 years. It's a matter of great coincidence that after I took oath as the 52nd Chief Justice of India, the first function that I attended was at my native place, Amravati, and it was graced by my esteemed senior colleague and one of the greatest sons of the Andhra Pradesh, Chief Justice Ramna, who, without being invited, was kind enough to come all the way to Amravati to bless me. And now, before I end my journey as the Chief Justice of India, in a couple of days, the last function that I am attending is again at Amravati. So, the journey which begins at Amravati will be ending at Amravati. Both the Amravatis have a great historical significance. Our Amravati in Maharashtra is known as Indrapuri, the land of Indra, and similarly I think the Indrapuri here is also, Amravati here is also known as the land of Indra. I am really grateful to the Honorable Chief Minister, the Honorable Chief Justice of the High Court, and the members of the association, the President of the association, for inviting me and giving me an opportunity to speak with you on the 75-year journey of the Indian Constitution. The subject that I have been given to speak is India and the living Constitution at 75 years. As all of us know that, as the Honorable Chief Justice referred to, after the Constituent Assembly was constituted, the Objectives Resolution was placed before the Constituent Assembly on 9th of December 1946. It was presented by the then Prime Minister of the interim government, Honorable Shri Jawaharlal Nehru. Dr. Ambedkar, who was merely a member of the Constituent Assembly, was called upon to address by the President of the Constituent Assembly, Shri Rajendra Babu, within 4 days, that is on 13th of December 1946. Dr. Ambedkar said that he was not ready to speak because, going by seniority, his turn would have come much later. But since he was called upon, he said he will share his views. And Dr. Ambedkar said that no doubt that the Objectives Resolution as presented by the Jawaharlal Nehru is pragmatic, but he said it is lacking of two basic things. Dr. Ambedkar said that the Objective Resolutions provides for the rights, but it doesn't provide for remedy. And he said that rights without remedy are meaningless. And therefore we find that the very foundation of Article 32 in the Constitution of India, which enables every citizen to knock the doors of the Supreme Court of breach of fundamental rights, finds its place in the first address made by Dr. Ambedkar before the Constituent Assembly. Likewise, he said that coming from Pandit Jawaharlal Nehru, and who represents the Congress ideology, he said that there is nothing in the objectives resolution which provided for the social and economic equality. And therefore, we find that the directive principles of the Indian Constitution, Part 4 of the Indian Constitution, which provides for directive principles, which is an instrument to achieve social and economic justice, also finds place in the Constituent Assembly, in the Constitution. As all of us know that our Constitution stands on the 4 pillars of justice, liberty, equality and fraternity. The Constituent Assembly put in Herculean labors for drafting the Constitution. 2 of the speeches of Dr. Ambedkar, the first one on 4th of November 1948, wherein he presented a draft Constitution to the Constituent Assembly, and the last one on the 25th of November 1949, wherein he replied the debates on the draft Constitution, are, I think, most important speeches which every student of law should read. And as the Honorable Chief Minister said that he is a student, I am also a student of law, because I always consider that whenever a judge or a lawyer considers that he has now learnt everything, that is the end of a career as a lawyer or as a judge. And therefore, as a student of law, we must reflect upon the Constituent Assembly debates which went on for almost a period of 2 years and more, to understand what is the constitutional philosophy behind our Constitution. As the Honorable Chief Minister said that Dr. Ambedkar always considered, or rather for every citizen, the nation must be first. And Dr. Ambedkar in his first speech on 13th of December said that whenever the destinies of the nation are involved, the destinies of the individuals, the destinies of the ideologies, the destinies of the leaders, the destinies of the political parties are totally irrelevant, and what is most important is the destiny of the nation. And therefore, in the heart of Dr. Ambedkar, it was India as a nation which was the most important. Coming to the main subject, that India and the living Indian Constitution at 75 years. Dr. Ambedkar always considered that a constitution cannot be a static document. It has to be evolving, it has to be organic and a living document. And therefore, the Article 368 provides for the Constitution, for the amendment of the Constitution. There was criticism on Dr. Ambedkar that on one hand he was criticized that the powers to amend the Constitution are too liberal, and on the other hand it was criticized that some of the amendments which require ratification by two-thirds of the states, by half of the states and two-thirds majority of the parliament were too strong, and it was difficult to achieve an amendment in this manner. He said that wherever the amendments were necessary for answering the socio-economic challenges, the Constitution could be amended in a simpler way. But however, wherever a foundation of the Constitution like the independence of judiciary, the federal structure or the other important aspects are concerned, the power to amend the Constitution could not be simple, and therefore it was necessary that some more stringent conditions were required for amending the Constitution. As we see that we gave our Constitution to ourselves on the 26th of November 1949, 49 and which came into effect from 26th of January 1950. The apprehensions as expressed by Dr. Ambedkar came to be true within a short period. In 1950, immediately after the Constitution came, the state of Tamil Nadu, then the state of Madras, had issued a government order providing for reservation for the scheduled caste and scheduled caste. The same came to be challenged before the Madras High Court on the ground that it was contrary violation of Article 14. The said challenge was upheld by the Madras High Court. It was carried before the Supreme Court in a Constitution bench judgment. And in the celebrated judgment of Champakaran versus the state of Madras, the Supreme Court upheld the judgment of the Madras High Court and held the provision of reservation to be unconstitutional. And therefore we find that in the very first amendment in 1951, the amendment which was moved by none else than Pandit Jawaharlal Nehru, Article 15 was amended so as to provide for reservation for the backward classes. Similarly, between 1946 to 1950, various states, in order to provide for agrarian reforms like the Ceilings Act, like the Agricultural Tenancy Act, had enacted various laws. Those laws were challenged. Some of the high courts upheld the validity of the laws. Some of the high courts negated the validity of the said enactments. And therefore, in order to bring about clarity, the same amendment also inserted Article 31A and 31B so as to provide for the agrarian reforms. The issue with regard to amendment of the Constitution came to be considered by the Supreme Court as early as in Shankari Prasad, to which the learned Chief Justice has referred to. And by a unanimous verdict, the 5 judges held that the Parliament's power to amend the Constitution cannot be restrained. It was held that if the Parliament, in order to answer the socio-economic challenges faced by the subsequent generations, is restricted for amending the Constitution, then the Constitution would not be a static or would not be a living document, and it will be a static document. That was subsequently considered in Sajjan Singh, by virtue of 3-2, the power of the Constitution, power of the Parliament to amend the Constitution came to be upheld. But the seats of dissent were sowed in the very same judgment. Justice Hidayatullah said that to hold that the Parliament's power to amend the Constitution are unbridled, and they can even amend the Constitution to take away the fundamental rights, I would require stronger reasons than the ones given in Shankari Prasad. Justice Mudolkar, he said that if the power to amend the Constitution is to be construed as taking away the basic features of the Constitution, then the word amend will have no importance and it will amount to changing the Constitution. And therefore we find that the concept of basic structure as evolved in Keshavanand Bharati has its roots in the case of Sajjan Singh. Subsequently, the 9 judges in Golaknath held that the powers of the Parliament to amend the Constitution were restricted, and it could not amend the Constitution in a manner it takes away the fundamental rights of the citizens. That gave rise to the 24th, 25th and 26th Amendment, by which various articles were either inserted or amended so as to carry forward the goal of the Indian Constitution of achieving social and economic justice. The same came to be challenged in the Keshavanand Bharati, wherein the Supreme Court for the first and so far for the last time, sat in a combination of 13 judges. Insofar as the power to amend the Constitution is concerned, the court was virtually split by 6-6. 6 judges took a view that the powers of the Parliament to amend the Constitution are unbridled and the Parliament by majority can amend the Constitution in any manner. However, the 6 judges took a view that the Parliament's power to amend the Constitution are restricted and it cannot amend the Constitution to take away the fundamental rights guaranteed to the citizen. It is only the view of Justice H.R. Khanna, partly accepted by 6 on one hand and partly accepted by 6 on the other hand, which is now the view in Keshavanand Bharati. Justice Khanna held that though the Parliament can amend the power even to take away the fundamental rights, it cannot amend the Constitution in a manner in which it takes away the basic structures of the Constitution. And therefore, the concept of basic future as found in Sajjan Singh, which was amplified as basic structure in Keshavanand Bharati, is what is the law which holds the field. Various principles like the federal structure of the Constitution, the separation of 3 wings, the executive, the judiciary, and the executive, judiciary, and the legislature, the independence of judiciary, the supremacy of the Constitution were held to be the basic structures which were subsequently evolved in various judgments, including the one in S.R. Bommai. As has been observed by the Honorable Chief Minister, it is all the 3 wings of the Constitution, that is, the legislature, the executive, the judiciary, which are enjoined upon to carry forward the mandate of the Constitution to bring in social and economic justice. One of the greatest weapons for promoting the social and economic justice as envisioned by Dr. Ambedkar was Part 4, that is the directive principles. And though we see that from 1950 to 1973, the tilt of the courts was always that wherever a conflict arose between the directive principles and the fundamental rights, the supremacy of the fundamental rights was always recognized. It was felt that wherever there is a conflict between the directive principles and the fundamental rights, the directive principles will have to give its way to the fundamental rights. It is for the first time in Keshavanand Bharati that this conflict was resolved. Though the court was virtually split on the question of Parliament's power to amend the Constitution, it was unanimous to hold that the directive principles and fundamental rights together and together alone are the soul of the Constitution. And therefore, Keshavanand Bharati held that the fundamental rights as well as the directive principles are together are necessary for progress of the nation. It was held that directive fundamental rights are those rights which are necessary for a human being, for a citizen to live a dignified life as a human being. Whereas the directive principles were the principles which govern the state, the legislature, and they guide them in order to enact the laws and take steps to further the promise of economic and social justice. Some of the honorable judges also held that the courts are also states within the meaning of Article 12, and therefore it is the duty of the courts also to interpret the laws and decide the cases in accordance with the directive principles. And therefore we find that in the 75 years of the Constitution, we have found the executive, the legislature, and the judiciary to be on the same page, and particularly after 1973. Many of the laws have been enacted in furtherance of the promise of the social and economic justice, like the Agriculture Shilling Act, wherein a person cannot hold an agricultural land beyond a particular holding. The tenancy laws, wherein those persons who were tenants of the agricultural lands became owners thereof. And these all laws were held to be constitutional by the court, taking recourse to fundamental rights, particularly Article 39, 2B and C, which ensures the equitable distribution of the resources of the country. Though the fundamental rights of the citizens were affected by such enactments, the Parliament, the legislatures enacted them and the courts upheld them. Insofar as scheduled caste and scheduled tribe is concerned, to which again the Honorable Chief Justice referred with regard to reservation, the earlier view, as could be found in the cases of Devdas and Balaji, was that sub-article 4 of Article 16 was an exception to the main article of 16, and it was only a permissible way of providing reservation. But however, the 7 judges bench in N.M. Thomas overruled that view, and it held that Article 16.4 was only an empathetic way of saying that it is already inbuilt in Article 14 and Article 16. It held that Article 14 and 16 promise an equality of opportunity to all the citizens in the country. But it said that equality of opportunity does not mean that equal opportunity to all the citizens. It said that if equal opportunity to provide it to all the citizens, then it will lead to nothing else but more inequalities. And therefore, a special treatment to those who are lagging behind was already inbuilt in Article 14 and Article 16. It has been further carried forward in Indira Swani, the 9 judges bench, which held that the reservation was not an anti-meritarian, and it also held that the reservation could be provided even by an executive instruction, and it was not necessary that it has to be by a legislative piece. Recently, in the last year, we sat in a 7 judges combination to consider the issue with regard to subclassification. All 7 of us, out of 7, the 6 of us took a view that a subclassification was permissible. If the state government finds that even among the scheduled caste, a certain sections of the society, section of the scheduled caste are not adequately represented, and if it is found that only a particular sections in the scheduled caste have taken the benefits of the reservation, then the state cannot be precluded of its right of providing a special treatment to those who are underrepresented. I also went further and took a view that the concept of creamy layer, as has been found in the judgment of Indira Swani insofar as the other backward classes are concerned, should also be made applicable to scheduled caste, though my judgment has been widely criticized on that issue. But I still hold that judges are not supposed to normally justify their judgments, and I still about a week to go. But if a person who is an IAS officer, he becomes a chief secretary, and his son gets the best of education in a city like Hyderabad or Bangalore, would a child of a poor agricultural labor studying in the village, though both belonging to scheduled caste, could be equated? And my answer to that was no. It denied equality of opportunity. 3 of the learned judges concurred with my view. And therefore, the concept of equality has to be ensured that the equality should not be only a paper equality, but a real equality. Insofar as women are concerned, we know that Dr. Ambedkar used to say that women are the most backward amongst the citizens of the country. As all of us know that in Maharashtra, Mahatma Jyotiba Phule and Savitribai Phule had to fight with the fundamentalists in those times, even to provide basic education to women. And Mahatma Jyotiba Phule, to whom Dr. Ambedkar used to consider as guru, incidentally, Baba Saheb Ambedkar was born in a year in which Jyotiba Phule passed away and they could not have an opportunity to meet each other. But he always considered him as a guru, and Baba Saheb said that the women are the most downtrodden in this country, and therefore he provided for equality, equal treatment to women. And we find that over the years, the equality or the women empowerment is gaining momentum in the country. The discrimination which was meted out to women was strongly criticized in the case of Nargis Mirza, wherein the women air hostesses, the rule provided that the woman air hostess on either getting married within the 4 years of employment or on the fourth pregnancy would discontinue as an air hostess. The Supreme Court said that a denial of an opportunity of a motherhood to a woman and availability of the same opportunity to a male hostess was patently discriminatory and set aside the said rule. In Vishaka, the Supreme Court laid down guidelines so as to prevent harassment to the working women at their workplaces. Subsequently, the Parliament enacted a law in order to bring Vishaka guidelines and give it a statutory post. In the case of Babita Punia, the Supreme Court paved the way of equal opportunity to the women. And therefore we find that when I had been to Ladakh in the last year, we have our women soldiers even in the frontiers. I have been traveling to various states over the years after I joined the Supreme Court and addressing also the judicial academies. And I was happy to note that in some of the states, 60 to 70% women are selected as a JMFC. And therefore the country has also progressed towards the women empowerment, women equality. I am happy to see a large number of women judicial officers and women lawyers present here. One of them is my gift to your High Court. Disha Chaudhary, who was my law clerk in the first batch, is present here. And therefore we find that in the last 75 years, we have substantially progressed when we are referring to reservation. The 103rd Amendment has provided for 15(6), Article 6 of 15, which provides for reservation to the economically weaker sections. One of the latest amendments, the 106th Amendment, provides for reservation of 1/3 seats in Parliament and the legislature to women. Dr. Ambedkar always used to say that education is very important and the rights without education are without use. Unless a person is aware about his rights, unless he is educated about his rights, the rights would not be no assistance to him. And therefore the Supreme Court, as early as 70s, in the case of Mohini Jain and Unni Krishnan, held the right to education as one of the fundamental rights. Subsequently, the Parliament, by bringing in Article 21A to the Constitution, also upheld the right to education to be a fundamental right. And therefore now we have a right to free education to the children up to 14 years. By the subsequent amendments, the empowerment of the Panchayat Raj, the Jila Parishads, the Panchayat Samitis, the municipal councils, the Nagar Panchayats has also been exemplified. The earlier view was that only the fundamental rights which are incorporated in Part 3 would only be the fundamental rights. But Maneka Gandhi onwards, the Supreme Court has exemplified that anything which flows from the trinity of Article 14, 19 and 21 would be construed to be a fundamental right. And therefore we see plethora of rights: right to food, right to shelter, right to potable water, right to medical treatment, and so on. As evolved in the cases of MC Mehta, the right to pollution-free environment, the right to potable water, and as evolved by the Supreme Court in the case of T.N. Godavaranam, the right to environment, the right to ecology, are all evolved to be the fundamental rights. Dr. Ambedkar, on his last speech in 25th of November 1949, gave a warning to all of us. He said that by one vote, one person, one vote and one principle, we have assured a political economy to the citizens of the country. But in our preamble, we have assured justice, social, economic and political to all our citizens. And he said that a political economy, political justice, political equality without the social or economic equality beneath it are of no use. And he said, what does he mean by social and economic equality? And he answered that a country or a society which believes in equality, liberty and fraternity as ways of its life is what he means by social and economic justice. And he said that equality, liberty and fraternity not alone, but the trinity of three of them would only lead to social and economic justice. Dr. Ambedkar said that equality without liberty will take away an incentive of a human being to excel in his life. And liberty alone would lead to supremacy of the powerful over the weaker. And therefore, equality and liberty together and the fraternity will act like a policeman, and therefore this trinity of the trinity of equality, liberty and fraternity would be necessary to take country forward in achieving the social and economic justice. Dr. Ambedkar warned that on 26th of January 1950 will be assuring a political equality. But what about economic and social equality? On an economic plane, we will have a society divided in the economic wealth of the country concentrated in few hands, where the majority of the citizens living beyond the poverty line finding it difficult to meet the two ends of a day. On a social plane, we have a society divided into four layers, four compartments, and such compartments where entry from one compartment to other compartment is not possible. And therefore he said that unless we eradicate these inequalities, the edifice of democracy which we have so laboriously built would collapse like a house of cards. And I must say that in the last journey of 75 years, the legislature, parliament, the executive and the judiciary have acted in furtherance of the goal of the economic and social justice as envisioned by the Constitution. Various laws may be agrarian reforms in the favor of, so as to protect the exploitation of laborers. One of the first cases was Vijay Cotton Mills versus the Union of India, wherein the Minimum Wages Act, notification under the Minimum Wages Act came to be challenged on the ground that if a citizen is willing to work in my farm or in my factory for 10 rupees, why should I be compelled to pay 20 rupees? It will be violative of my fundamental rights. The Supreme Court answered that the promise made in Article 43 of providing living wages cannot be an empty promise, and it has to be given in reality. And therefore, many enactments have been enacted by the Parliament, by the state legislature, so as to take forward the promise of social and economic justice. The executive has taken steps like providing reservation to the scheduled caste, scheduled tribe, the other backward classes. The Constitution has been amended even to provide reservation in promotions. The judiciary, at least from 1973 onwards, has always ruled in favor of the enactments which upheld the promise of the social and economic justice. Or rather, in one of the cases, Vaman Rao versus State of Maharashtra, while upholding a legislative piece of legislation in furtherance of economic and social justice, Chief Justice Y.V. Chandrachud, speaking for the bench, held that more and more such legislations would be welcome so as to take forward the promise of economic and social justice. In Minerva Mills, he said that directive principles and fundamental rights together are necessary for taking forward the social and economic justice. He said that they are like two wheels of a golden chariot of Indian Constitution. You span one wheel and the efficacy of entire chariot comes to a standstill. And therefore, in last 75 years, we have seen that the country has substantially progressed in taking forward the promise of social and economic justice. Millions of landless laborers have been benefited by the selling laws. The lands taken by the landlords has been distributed to them. The tenants who are tilling the land have become owners of the land. The working conditions of the labor have been ameliorated, have been enhanced. The bonded labor which was prevalent has been banned. The Supreme Court, on a postcard litigation in the case of Bandhuwa Mukti Morcha, ensured that the living conditions of the bonded laborer, firstly the bonded labor was abolished and the living conditions of the laborers working in the mines were ensured so that their working conditions become healthy. We have had various enactments like the Food Security Act and so on. We have seen that on account of the affirmative action, the highest office of the country, the President of India, has been occupied twice by a person from scheduled caste, first by Mr. Narayanan and Mr. Ramnath Kovind. For the first time, we have a President of India who is not only a woman but also represents the tribal community. We have had a Prime Minister of India who was a woman, and as the Honorable Chief Minister rightly observed, the Prime Minister of India who says that it is only because of the Indian Constitution that a chaiwala could become the Prime Minister of the country. We had a speaker belonging to the scheduled caste from your own state, Mr. Balayogi, and also a speaker who belonged to scheduled caste and also a woman, Veera Kumari. We have in various states the chief secretaries, the director generals of police who belong to scheduled caste, scheduled tribe, and also women. As the Honorable Chief Minister said, that it is only because of the Indian Constitution that he could become the Chief Minister or I could become the Chief Justice of India. Coming from a humble background, from a school predominantly in a semi-slum area in Amravati, a municipal school, I could reach the highest office in the judiciary and contribute in my humble way to the nation building only because of the Indian Constitution of India. And therefore, for any constitution, the journey of 75 years is not too long. The constitutions have lived in certain countries for hundreds and hundreds of years. But I would be saying that in the last 75 years, the Indian constitution has not been a static constitution. It has been a living constitution responding to the socio-economic changes. It has been organic, it has been living and an evolving document carrying out the amendments needed to answer the socio-economic challenges as found in the society. As the Honorable Chief Minister stated that his aim is to prosper the state towards wealthy, healthy and happy state. Let us on this 75th year of the Constitution, the 75 years would come to an end shortly on 26th of November 2025. Let us all resolve that the Parliament, the Legislature, the Executive and the Judiciary and above all, the citizens of this country carry forward the mandate of socio-economic justice and see to it that the justice reaches last citizen of this country. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, sir, in enlightening us on the today's topic,